What's going on, guys? My name is Chris Holowchuk, and this is another session of Hollow Sessions. And today's topic is life is like a flat tire. Now, what do I mean by that? Anybody who's repaired a flat tire before knows that in order to get the whole patch, you gotta make a bigger hole to cut through the tire in order to get the patch into it. That can also be an example of an injury, like, if you're going to surgery, the surgeon has to re-break the bone for it to heal properly if it didn't heal right. It's a good example for life in general. Sometimes you gotta take a couple steps backwards, go forward again if you miss some steps along the way. I know for me, for example, in my music career, I've had to take some steps backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. A couple years ago, playing on Broadway for a year, downtown Nashville, and I got to play live and play in front of a bunch of people, but eventually I got cut unexpectedly. I needed to regroup, and I took some time away from music and regrouped, try to figure out why I was doing this. At that point, I felt like I'd reached one of the highest points I was ever going to reach in music. When, looking back now, I know that's not the case. There's always more and more you can do, more and more ground to cover, no matter where you are. When it comes to success, especially when it comes to music or anything in general, it's not a straight, upward climb. There's going to be a climb, dip, kind of like the stock market. It can be volatile, but you never know. Sometimes you need to step back and figure out, maybe you're making a mistake you weren't making before, that, if you didn't fall down and fall back a bit, then you would have, kept going, not knowing that mistake was there, and it would have crashed into something worse. You would have had a bigger fall. So it's better to have that happen beforehand, before you go any further. As well as even before I got to downtown Nashville playing on Broadway, I had to qualify. I had to do auditions, I'd go through training and stuff, and I thought I was the top of my game. And I was hearing, I go do vocal coaching and really get your rhythm down better. There's blind spots I didn't see that the people training me saw. I look back on some of my old videos and I realized those mistakes I was making. My old videos performing, that is. Without that criticism, without the growth, without that critique, I would have never gotten better. I feel like with life in general, sometimes you gotta hear that news you don't want to hear. Honestly, those friends that are willing to tell you what you don't want to hear, those are some of the best friends you can have, because they care about your growth. They don't care about your ego or their ego. They're willing to put their friendship on the line for you for the sake of you succeeding. And that's something a friend like money can't buy. That's a once in a lifetime kind of friend, and you should hang on to them tight, no matter how much they piss you off. And I have a handful of friends like that, and I'm thankful for each and every one of them. I have them in my life. They're the ones that keep me in check. They commend me when I'm doing good, but they ain't afraid to speak their mind when I have room for improvement in my life. And this can also relate to, let's say, a job. You lose your job, it paid decent, and you wanted to keep growing with that company, but you end up getting cut. Say you put out some resumes, make connections, and eventually down the road you get back into another good paying job, and that job ends up giving you better benefits, better pay, and you would have never gotten on that job if you had stuck with the old one, if you had stayed in your comfort zone. And you never had that fall, that down moment. You wouldn't have risen further than you would have by sticking inside your comfort zone like that. Another example too could be, a relationship that you thought they were the one, you thought they were right for you. They end up breaking your heart, and it crushes you. It takes you a long time to recover. You're wondering if you're ever going to find somebody like that again. But then later on down the road, you realize that person wasn't right for you from the get-go by separating yourself from them. Letting the love endorphins and I guess the breakup shock wear off. You realize that person was flawed. When they seemed perfect when you were with them, like the perfect person for you. And then with that time alone that you took working on yourself, you end up attracting somebody even better. Somebody, this last person doesn't even rival, and you would have never met them if you hadn't had that heartbreak. If you never would have worked on yourself and kept yourself open for that next person. In general, relates to a flat tire that can be patched. In order to fix it properly, you gotta make that hole a little bigger. You gotta make the hole worse. And then once you make that hole worse, then the hole's big enough to fit the patch in. And once you squeeze it on down, the hole's fixed, and it's all smooth sailing from there. You're good to go. And same for, you know, a broken bone. You know, that surgeon broke it, but then you had time where you healed properly, and now you're back to new again. And that's life in general. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did find any value in this, please do like and subscribe to my channel. It helps me get the message out to more and more people. With that being said, my name is Chris Holacek, and Holla is hollin' out.